Before we begin, take a second and imagine this: a group of tough, leather-clad bikers standing in a parking lot, laughing at a teenage girl who looks completely out of place among them. They think they know her story. They think they know why she's there. But a few moments later, one small patch sewn onto her old jacket changes everything, and the laughter disappears so fast that you could hear a pin drop. Stay with me until the end, because this story carries a lesson that many people learn far too late. And if stories about courage, kindness, and unexpected heroes inspire you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another unforgettable story. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of a roadside diner just outside a small town. The place was famous among bikers. Every Saturday, dozens of motorcycles lined the asphalt like a parade of chrome and steel. The roar of engines, laughter, and conversations filled the air. On this particular Saturday, a 16-year-old girl named Emma slowly walked across the parking lot. She wore worn-out jeans, old boots, and a faded black biker jacket that looked several sizes too large. The sleeves nearly covered her hands. Her dark hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and she looked nervous as she stepped toward the diner. The jacket immediately drew attention. Not because it was fashionable. Not because it was expensive. But because it looked ancient. Several bikers standing near their motorcycles noticed her and exchanged amused glances. "Looks like she borrowed her grandpa's jacket," one man joked. A few others laughed. "Maybe she's trying to join a motorcycle club. She doesn't even look old enough to ride." The comments continued. Emma heard every word. She lowered her eyes and kept walking. She had spent most of her life learning how to ignore cruel remarks. Still, the laughter stung. Especially today. Because today mattered more than anyone there could possibly understand. She entered the diner and sat quietly in a corner booth. Through the window, she could see the bikers continuing their conversations. Most people in town knew the biker gathering happened every weekend. What they didn't know was why Emma had finally decided to come. 3 years earlier, Emma's life had been very different. Her father, Daniel, had been her best friend. He was a mechanic who could repair almost anything with an engine. He wasn't rich. He didn't own a fancy house. But he possessed something far more valuable. A heart that never stopped helping people. Daniel loved motorcycles. Every evening after work, he would take Emma for rides through the countryside. She remembered wrapping her arms around his waist while the wind rushed past them. Those rides became her happiest memories. Whenever life felt difficult, Daniel would tell her the same thing. People will judge you before they know you. Never let their opinions become your identity. At the time, Emma didn't fully understand what he meant. Years later, those words would become her anchor. One rainy night, everything changed. Daniel was driving home after helping a stranded family fix a flat tire on a highway. A distracted driver crossed into his lane. The crash happened instantly. By the time emergency crews arrived, Daniel was gone. Emma was 13. The loss shattered her world. For months, she barely spoke. She stopped smiling. She stopped doing things she loved. The motorcycle remained parked in the garage, untouched. Every time she looked at it, the pain returned. Her mother struggled too. Bills piled up. Money became tight. Life grew harder than either of them expected. One afternoon, while cleaning the garage, Emma found her father's old biker jacket hanging on a nail. She lifted it carefully. The leather was worn from years of riding. It smelled faintly of engine oil. And on the back was a patch. A patch she had seen hundreds of times growing up. It carried the emblem of a motorcycle charity group called Road Guardians. The group consisted of bikers who volunteered their time helping stranded motorists, delivering supplies during emergencies, and supporting families in need. Daniel had been one of the founding members. Emma remembered attending charity events with him when she was younger. She remembered how proudly he wore that patch. Holding the jacket in her hands, she cried harder than she had in months. But for the first time since losing him, she also felt something else. Purpose. Over the next several years, she began learning everything she could about her father's work. She spoke to people he had helped. She read letters they had written. One family told her Daniel had paid for repairs when they couldn't afford them. Another said he had delivered medicine during a snowstorm. An elderly woman said Daniel visited her every week after her husband died. Emma realized something important. Her father hadn't become special because he rode a motorcycle. He became special because he cared. That realization changed her life. She started volunteering around town. She helped elderly neighbors with groceries. She tutored younger students after school. She organized small fundraisers. Piece by piece, she carried forward the kindness her father had shown others. Then one day she received a letter. It came from the Road Guardians. The group was planning its annual gathering at the diner. They had learned about Emma's volunteer work. Someone had nominated her for a community service award. The letter included an invitation. At the bottom was a sentence that made her hands tremble. "We would be honored if you wore Daniel's jacket." That was why she was here today. That was why the laughter hurt. Because nobody outside knew the meaning behind the oversized jacket. Back in the parking lot, the bikers continued talking. One man named Rick had been among those laughing earlier. He was a large, gray-bearded rider who had attended the gatherings for years. As he glanced through the diner window, something caught his attention. The patch. He squinted. Then his expression changed. He stepped closer to the glass. "No way," he whispered. Another biker looked over. "What?" Rick pointed toward Emma. The second biker froze. Soon a third rider noticed. Then a fourth. Within moments, several members of the group stared toward the diner. The laughter stopped completely. Silence replaced it. Because they recognized the patch. And they remembered the man who wore it. Daniel. The friend who had helped everyone. The writer who never ignored someone in need. The man whose funeral had drawn hundreds of motorcycles from across the state. Rick slowly entered the diner. The room grew quieter. Emma looked up nervously. Rick approached her table. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he noticed tears forming in her eyes. His voice softened. "You're Daniel's daughter, aren't you?" Emma nodded. Rick swallowed hard. "I haven't seen that jacket in years." The entire diner seemed to pause. Rick looked around. Then he addressed everyone loudly. "Do you know who this young lady is?" The crowd remained silent. "She's the daughter of one of the greatest men I've ever known." Suddenly every biker who had laughed earlier looked uncomfortable. Rick continued. "That patch doesn't represent a motorcycle club. It represents service. Compassion. Sacrifice. Daniel spent his life helping people. And from what I've heard, his daughter is doing the exact same thing." Emma's eyes widened. She hadn't expected this. More bikers entered the diner. One by one they approached her table. Each carried a story. One told her how Daniel had repaired his motorcycle for free when he lost his job. Another remembered Daniel driving 3 hours to help during a flood. A woman recalled how he bought Christmas presents for struggling families every year. The stories kept coming. Some laughed while remembering him. Others fought back tears. Emma listened quietly. For years she had feared people would eventually forget her father. Now she realized she had been wrong. His kindness still lived in dozens of hearts. Then something remarkable happened. The owner of the diner tapped a spoon against a glass. The room became silent. A representative from the Road Guardians stood. He held a small wooden box. "Emma," he said, "your father believed kindness creates ripples that never truly end." He opened the box. Inside was a custom patch. Unlike any the group had ever made before. The design included the original Road Guardian's emblem surrounded by a silver border. Beneath it were the words, "Legacy Writer." The man smiled. "This patch has never existed before today." Emma stared at it. "We created it for you." Tears rolled down her cheeks. The room erupted into applause. But the biggest surprise was still waiting. Outside, dozens of bikers gathered beside their motorcycles. Rick handed Emma a helmet. "What is this?" she asked. He smiled. "An escort." She looked confused. "Your father led charity rides for years. Today, we'd like to honor both of you." A motorcycle rider offered her a seat behind him. Moments later, engines began roaring to life. One after another. Dozens of them. The sound echoed across the town. People stepped outside stores to watch. Families stood on sidewalks. Cars pulled over. The enormous group slowly moved through town with Emma at the center. For the first time in years, she felt her father beside her. Not physically, but through every life he had touched. When the ride ended, they arrived at a community center. There, Emma discovered another surprise. The bikers had raised thousands of dollars to support her volunteer projects. Food drives, school programs, community outreach. Everything she dreamed of expanding. She stood speechless. Rick placed a hand on her shoulder. "Your father started something special." He smiled. "Looks like you're continuing it." That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Emma sat alone for a few moments wearing her father's jacket. She ran her fingers across the new patch, then across the old one. And she thought about what had happened. Earlier that day, strangers had judged her within seconds. They saw an oversized jacket and made assumptions. They laughed because they didn't know the story. But the moment they learned the truth, everything changed. The experience reminded her of something her father once said. People judge what they see. Wisdom comes from looking deeper. Years later, Emma would become one of the most respected community leaders in the region. The volunteer programs she built would help thousands. Many people would know her name. But she never forgot that Saturday afternoon. She never forgot the laughter. And she never forgot the silence that followed. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a person can wear isn't expensive clothing, a fancy title, or a symbol of status. Sometimes it's a legacy. A legacy built through kindness. A legacy earned through service. A legacy strong enough to speak when words aren't necessary. And that is the lesson of this story. Never judge someone based on what you see on the surface. Every person you meet is carrying a story you know nothing about. The quiet girl in an old jacket may be carrying the legacy of a hero. The stranger you overlooked today may be fighting a battle you cannot imagine. Kindness costs nothing, yet its impact can last for generations. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this message with someone who needs to hear it. Because every act of kindness creates a ripple, and you never know whose life you might change simply by choosing compassion over judgment.